How's it going, everybody? This is Justin, aka Hollywood Hambone, here with another movie review. I'm not going to do it on my own. I was going to bring in this special guest, but before I did, I was going to thank all the Patreons for everybody's support and everything, because this person is going to help me out tonight happens to be a Patreon himself. He's coming on to help me do this movie review because he was pretty interested in the movie. And the movie that we'll be talking about, I'll let you know right after I bring him in. What's up, Chris? How you doing, man?
I got to roll a D20 to know that answer.
I got you. So my man went straight for it and gave you like the big clue, the big hint, because today we're going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Now, everybody, I was worried. I was scared. The last Dungeons and Dragons movie we got was probably one of the crappiest movies of all time. Almost not even, it's almost boring bad. Like, it had some fun bad moments, I guess, in that first original movie that you could go back to and laugh a little bit about. But it was almost so bad, it was boring bad, where you couldn't even laugh at how bad it was and everything else. So we had this movie. It was talked about. It's coming out. I started getting a little more excited about it and everything else. They had a decent amount of, good actors here and actresses and stuff like that. And so I was getting a little more hyped and everything else, but I didn't get too hyped because of what we got before. The first iteration of a Dungeons and Dragons movie. And there's so many things that they could talk about and show and all this other stuff. And what would they be able to put together? It's not going to be easy per se to just put a story in the Dungeons and Dragons like universe and like it look and feel super awesome and amazing. So I know it's a hard task. But anything, Chris, that you had leading up to it, like your maybe fears, or maybe you thought they were going to do a good job all along?
I didn't know what to expect going into it. Like, I saw the visuals and it was nice. Like, when I first saw the first trailer and there was like an owl bear and we saw like oozes and different creatures and stuff. I'm like, all right, we're getting the flavor here. That's something we didn't get with the very first movie that came out. So it was nice to see all of these odes to Dungeons and Dragons as a history. It was really, really exciting to go into it. I really wanted to see this.
Yeah, when you're talking about that going into the previews and stuff, like, yeah, man, when they showed like the owl bear and stuff, I got more and more excited. When I can't remember the name of the chest, but when they were showing the chest that would like attack you when you open it up.
Mimic. That's a mimic, Justin.
Mimic. Yeah, exactly. So like those things that were in there, I was like, oh, hell yeah. And to be honest with you, watching the previews, watching, the things coming in, I was like, you know what? This feels like a party, right? Because the one thing about Dungeons and Dragons, because we both played it. Actually, Chris still plays it, and I'm actually a member of my family wants me to come join, so I may start playing here and there as well, like in person, Dungeons and Dragons. But like the thing about that is because we know about some of the lore, we know about some of the characters and stuff. Like, we know that when you sit down at the table, people a lot of times choose different things, right? So for instance, the last time I played Dungeons and Dragons, like I don't have a guitar or whatever that I could go around playing. Actually, my son has one, so technically I could try to, but I'm not like a very good musician or anything like that. But the last time I played, I picked a bard, something totally different from like who I actually am and stuff like that, and everything else. And like a lot of times, say like the women or ladies that join in on D&D, they don't want to be like, a healer or something like that, that's automatically picked for them sometimes for women characters and stuff. They want to be like something different. So they'll pick something like a druid, or they'll pick something like a barbarian. So I actually thought the way the character makeup, the way that the party was made up was actually, pretty close to like, you sitting at home doing a homebrew D&D game, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this oozes with the spirit of what Dungeons and Dragons is all about. And that's its strength. Its strength is that if you're a fan, if you've ever heard of Dungeons and Dragons, like, you could watch this and get a full idea of what Dungeons and Dragons is. It doesn't disrespect it. It doesn't insult it. It knows exactly what it is, and it plays to those strengths.
Right. And so for one, before we get talking about the nitty gritty, I do want to pull this up really quick. This is just pure out amazing. Like, cannot believe that this would ever be scores, critics and fans alike. Rotten Tomatoes so far, Dungeons and Dragons numbers has come in. I got excited when I saw these numbers because like people got to see this movie earlier. They did some kind of, you know, new like Amazon, like something like pass. So it came out like actually a 2 weeks. It came out like 2 weeks you know, before it even really realistically opened up. It came out like 2 weeks ahead of time, which I thought was kind of cool and everything else. But 91% critics, 94% audience score. Like, bro, that is just something that's amazing. And for them to be like happy and proud about. Like, I never would have thought that would have happened for a Dungeons and Dragons style movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's got an advantage that I will say that it has Stranger Things to thank for this. Because in the new generation, Stranger Things made Dungeons and Dragons cool. More people are paying attention to it. This movie comes out and more people are like, yeah, let's give it a shot. And it's a damn good fantasy film.
All right, so let's get right into it. All right, Chris. So the first thing we'll talk about now, try to keep it spoiler free as much as possible for the people that may be just tuning in and hearing our like, you know, just first impressions and thoughts. But just give like your first impressions and non-spoilers, like kind of like a review, and then we'll jump into like the actual spoiler section.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not a fan of Dungeons and Dragons and you go and see this, they are definitely going to hold your hand and walk you through this. You get the character tropes. You don't have to know the locations. You don't have to know the lore. You don't even have to know the rules of the game. You don't. You could just walk in with it being a fantasy film and you're going to be entertained. But if you're a fan of this, you're going to have just as much fun, not just watching the film, but looking for all the Easter eggs and all the things that are Dungeons and Dragons. This does something that I think Star Trek 09 did when it first came out. It's where it plays to a new audience, but it gives respect and love to the lifelong fans. This does something that is a very difficult line to follow. This isn't as serious as, say, Lord of the Rings, you know, or even The Hobbit, whether you like it or not. But it is a beautifully well done fantasy tale, and it's worth the time. It's hard not to give spoilers about this because everything is entwined with everything in this film.
Right. So like, here goes the thing right here. I'm just going to be honest with you too. Another amazing thing that it did this weekend at the box office, and like I said, it actually was released 2 weeks before this. So some people that were really like excited about seeing the movie, I was actually excited but bummed because I ended up having to work those nights that they were released. Because like I said, it was like a 2-night release, and it was like 2 weeks ago.
It was through Amazon.
Movie, this movie did over $37 million at the box office and took out John Wick 4. Now, for people that watch our shorts or watch like reviews or anything like that, they know that like I did a double feature. I watched Dungeons and Dragons and then turned around because I wanted to knock both of them out and saw John Wick 4. I had more fun, even though I enjoyed both movies, but I had more fun with the Dungeons and Dragons. And that's saying something, man, because like the Dungeons and Dragons, like I said, it had the action, kind of like John Wick. It's got action, but it had the action, the comedy, the characters, the story. Like Dungeons and Dragons, believe it or not, and this to me was the hardest thing I spoke about earlier. Dungeons and Dragons has like a pretty damn good plot and story behind it. Whereas like John Wick 4, on the other hand, is just like, okay, we're gonna cram action at you nonstop. Okay, here, this is a very simple plot. Like you're trying to get to this thing to kill this, you know what I'm saying? In the John Wick movie. But right here, Dungeons and Dragons, man, like it had more nuance to it. There was different things, twists and turns a little bit in the story, things they went to do, and then they had to do it a different way, stuff like that. Like I said, it had a lot more into it, and like it just seemed like I had more fun watching Dungeons and Dragons than I did John Wick 4. And what I'm saying is that's not like me saying, oh, John Wick 4 sucks, like, and this movie was good. Oh, this movie was great, and John Wick 4 was great. I mean, good. So like John Wick 4 was good. And then this movie, though, surpassed it and went to great, man. This movie, and like you said too, with yours is if you know about the lore and know about some of these locations and stuff, man, like it heightened it up even more, right? Like when they were talking about certain locations like Neverwinter or, you know, any of these places, you were like, oh, your ears perked up and everything else. And like I said earlier, like the Mimic, the Box, and some of the creatures and stuff like that, like Owlbear and stuff like that, like you know about them already, and to be able to see them in live action and done well, because the CGI on this thing is knocking out of the park. Good. Like I didn't have any problems or I think the only thing that kind of looked a little funny, but I think they did it on purpose, was a certain character that was like this bird or whatever. Like there was a point in there, it looked like it was just like a person kind of wearing a suit, which they might have been doing that right in that particular instance. But yeah, man, like straight up 100%. Really thoroughly enjoyed this movie and stuff like that. And so let's actually start talking about it. So like if you've been watching so far these first 11 minutes, we haven't really spoiled a lot. But from here on out will be spoilers. But Chris, man, give me your thoughts on the direction and the actors.
Yeah, this really felt to me like I felt when I first watched the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. In fact, the makeup of this almost really does feel like Guardians of the Galaxy to me. You've got your main character, Chris Pine. Chris Pine he's a bard who is also a harper. They are a group of protectors who work for no profit. They just work for the sake of protecting others. And in the process of his job, he ends up doing something that costs them, and he ends up in prison. We actually open the film him in prison with Michelle Rodriguez's character. She's a barbarian, Holga the barbarian. And she very much kind of fits the Gamora role. Chris Pine clearly fits the Star-Lord role. And it kind of follows these beats as we begin to meet individuals and add them into our party. Not knowing, what they're going to do. They're a ragtag bunch. Can they work together? Can they not work together? And this cast has such chemistry for each other. I absolutely love Simon, played by Justice Smith. Simon, the wizard. No, he's a sorcerer. He's a sorcerer, not a wizard. There is a difference. He's not a great sorcerer, and he admits that. Let me tell you, fresh cut grass. I will never look at that the same way again. He actually has to spell giving fresh cut grass smell. It's funny. Sophia Lillis as Doric the druid. Hugh Grant as Forge the rogue. And then not in it as much, but Regine Page as Zenek the paladin kind of ties up this group here. And they all work so well together. Oh, and then Chris Pine's daughter. Kira, played by Coley Coleman. She's so cute in this. Again, she doesn't have a major part to play, but once you see her, you kind of know where this is going to go with her character. There aren't a lot of surprises in this film, and normally that's not something I like. Normally, I'm like, I want you to give me something. Give me character quirks. Give me ways to go. This doesn't do that. This does not deviate, but the actors sell it. The actors absolutely sell their quests. And that's the thing. This film is just a series of quests to achieve one goal in the end. And that's why it works. Dungeons and Dragons often is that way. So I think Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley, who directed this, they had to understand the nature of Dungeons and Dragons and how this works. And in comparison, the actors were the players and they were the DMs. And they were able to weave this story together and help guide these players through this journey. And it really was an enjoyable trip. And in the end, the strength of this film, while its lore and its attention to detail is great, you like the characters. Even Forge, who's a jerk. I don't like Hugh Grant. I'm not a Hugh Grant fan. I liked him as Forge. Even though you're not supposed to like him, you know what I mean. Like it works as kind of a villain-ish. It really works, and then it's rounded out by the true villains of the film, Daisy Head, who plays Safina, the Red Wizard of Thay, who is really our bad guy in this film. And it all works with our cast of characters. This movie does not work if these guys are not believable and likable, and all of them work. You're muted.
Yeah, but yeah, I totally agree with a lot of the things that you said. The direction was like, dude, I don't know how they did it. I've actually been pleasantly surprised by like a couple of things, right? Like, one of them is this Dungeons and Dragons movie. The other one's The Last of Us. The Last of Us knocking I think some of the stink off of like video game adaptations, because now it can be done. You know, it can be done. It's a great season 1. The Last of Us is just amazing. This movie right here took something that you probably a lot of people were thinking about. Oh, can't be done, can't make money, and everything else, and it's done over like $80 million in its first weekend, like worldwide and stuff like that. Over 40 something million, like domestically, if you count them 2 days that I was talking about that you could go see it early. So when you look at those kind of things, like, it's like, well, dang, this thing's, you know, possibly going to make some money. So like now there's going to be a chance. You know how studios are. They're going to be like, oh yeah, here we go. Let's make a second one. So I would be excited if it's most of the same team, right? Almost all the same team comes back to put out a number 2. I'll be excited about it because they did such a great job. The direction was good. Cinematography and all that stuff was really good. Like I said earlier, the CGI was like really good, except for that Jacob, that bird guy. Like there was a time where he got tackled or whatever. It almost felt like it was a person wearing like a rubber suit. But like that character was so like dumb and just kind of funny and just there for like comic relief that I think maybe they had him cheesed up a little bit and what have you, like that he didn't look like as good as some of the other characters on purpose because of that.
He's a bird man. I give it a little leap there. Like, how many bird men do you know? Like,
I'm not even complaining about it. But, well, like I said, but I'm not even complaining about it. I think it may have been done on purpose because it was just supposed to be a goofy character.
Yeah.
Right. Like you don't even know, like when you first hear about this little character that's supposed to be coming in when he's giving his big speech at the beginning to try to get out of prison, you think, oh, this is a guy that he likes or whatever, or knows from the past is probably going to step in and help him get out. But then it turns out he just wanted to be there so he could do what he did and grab him and jump out a window because he's a bird man, because he can fly. So, and he's not going to kill himself. So the bird guy is actually going to fly or whatever to save himself. But anyway, he was just kind of like this goofy character that they threw in there that fit in, that didn't make it like bad or anything else, that made it good. But like I said, all their decisions were like super good. When I go back and look at it, I don't even know like what kind of changes I'd have been possibly make, to be honest with you. And the actors, some of these actors in here didn't make me super excited. Michelle Rodriguez, Fast and the Furious franchise, like I don't think she's even that good in that, but like it is what it is. People love that franchise and stuff. Justin Jesse Smith, don't know a lot about him. Don't know a lot about the girl who played Kira. Don't know a lot about the person who like played Safina, like you said, the bad guy. I mean, I know Hugh Grant, obviously. And I know like Chris Pine, and I knew Michelle Rodriguez, for instance, but even the guy who played like the Paladin, whatever, Reggae Page or whatever, like this guy, don't know a lot about him and everything else, but they all did great. Like Michelle Rodriguez played, to me, her best character I've ever seen her play, because like she played a barbarian. She played someone who would come down, sit at the table and be like, you know what? I'm going to play a simple character. I'm going to play a barbarian. Here we go. I don't have to talk a lot. I'm just going to be doing a lot of the action. It fits, like I said earlier, like when you sit down at the table and play barbarian or play like a character in Dungeons and Dragons and everything else. But Chris Pine's done amazing in a lot of things, to be honest with you. And he's done really good in this movie right here as well. But I give everybody, there's not like props to the cast and props to the direction, like I said, too, because there's a couple of these actors or actresses that like I don't particularly love that much. And like they were able to shine in this movie to me. I wouldn't have made any different choices. So like that's another thing to give them all on. Like to give the actors and the directors and stuff like that, and the casting director and stuff, like all their props in the world, because they put this group together. And I would love to see this group do another adventure like in this world, because we only got to see like one. Yeah, we went to different locations and stuff like that during the film, but we only got to see one major location, right? Waterdeep.
Neverwinter.
Neverwinter was the town they were in. So so they talked about Waterdeep and stuff like that. But there's all these places that we could go to and have these journeys and adventures on and stuff like that. And it'd be cool, like that each movie, it's almost like the characters leveled up. So now Chris Pine's character, instead of just being a lute playing, little guy with some that can talk his way out of things and stuff like that, like a bard would be, maybe he gets some of his spells and stuff. Like he starts learning some of the bard spells. Like same thing, like barbarian character maybe gets better weapons, like that type of thing, right? Like maybe we could see these characters, like I said, level up, like progressively level up for the next film. That'd be like super cool to like see some of those, and like maybe they got to go up against something even worse than they had to in this movie. But heck yeah, one of the things that I loved about this that the director made was, and I think they fall into a trap, is trying to make the bad guy look stupid in films like this that have some comedy. They want to make the bad guy like almost comedy relief and whatnot. And like I love the fact the director chose not to do that in this. The actual bad person here never cracks jokes serious, and then when they start doing their thing, you realize how badass they are and everything else. But with that being said, let's move on to the next thing, man. Story and plot. Chris, what did you think about like the story and the plot, and if it was any good or not?
It's a very Dungeon Dragons-esque setup, and I like that. You're starting out in a prison, you got to escape, and then you got to head to the next town and get allies, and then you're sent on a quest, and in that quest you got a little mini quest you got to go into. Once you get that mini quest, then you go back and discover it's not the quest. This is a chain of events. This felt like I was watching a campaign play out in 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that really works for me as the story. I buy the story. It's a very Dungeons and Dragons-esque thing. The only thing that doesn't work for me, surprisingly, is our villain. Here's the thing. In Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of times you get a villain that's just evil. Evil for evil's sake. We never get anything else. And it's very common, but sometimes I want a little more. In film, I expect you to develop our villains just a little bit more. They didn't do that here. We don't really truly understand why the villains are doing what they're doing, other than evil reasons. Nyahaha. That's all they're doing. We understand Chris Pine. Chris Pine's reasoning is set out and actually plays into the plot. What are his real reasons for doing this? What's the true motivation of his heart and his character? As he's very early on, we find out that his wife died in this process. And he went on this one last heist for his daughter, but word that there was actually a special tablet that could be used to resurrect his wife. That's what he was after. And that is kind of his personal quest through this whole thing, is to get that tablet back. That's what he wants. But otherwise, the rest of it is, we're going to help this person. We got to help this person. We're going to stop this person. A very Dungeons and Dragons-esque. The plot itself works. I don't think the villains do. Yes, it follows all the tropes, but being a film, I wanted to develop our villain, and as in tropes, our villain actually works for somebody bigger, and we briefly see that individual, but we don't go into those details. I would have liked a little bit building of the lore and going into that for us to really kind of care or hate our villain truly. If there is a flaw in this film, I think it's in its villains. Otherwise, this is exactly what you expect it to be, and you're going to have a good time doing it. You're muted again.
But yeah, you're completely 100% right when it comes to this a little bit here. I'm not going to disagree with you. Like I said, they're not super fleshed out. Now, the main villain is on screen a decent amount of times, but like she's not doing a lot of things. You know what she's doing, but like you don't have to like spoon feed everything on here. We do get a glimpse of even a higher villain that's even higher than her, like her boss, but like we don't really get to see that, but like a very like in the shadow kind of thing. He doesn't really come out and do anything for this movie. That may be setting up a sequel. Now, with that being said, I'm gonna be honest with you. I did judge this movie on like how close would they get it if I sat at the table and played Dungeons and Dragons. And as characters is playing at a table playing Dungeons and Dragons, you don't know a lot about the villains. You bump into them at certain times. You have to take care of the issue as they come. Now, as you're there for a lot longer, right? As you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and doing a campaign over like weeks of a time period or something like that, you learn more and more and more about this like ultimate evil that you may have to face on your journey, kind of thing. But you don't get that, you know, at the very beginning. You don't get that with the first session or anything like that. So I I don't hate it completely, because I did think that she did, like I said in some of my opening statements, I thought that she did a fantastic job for what she had and what she did. Like, I just love the fact they didn't make them stupid or dumb or funny, like, and everything else. Hugh Grant had some of that, like, things where he might say or do something that's a little funny. And to me, ultimately, he may have even been the bad guy, not a big bad, obviously, because he's just a dude that can con his way in almost anything. But he had a decent amount of story told. So maybe it was because of the fact, because when we look at this movie, the tough thing that they did have to do, and I thought they did a good job overall. Like I said, I do understand your points in that, but like we had the pudgy dragon, right? So that's one bad guy that we had to do. Yeah, exactly. Like, and I thought that was hilarious. So that was the time for us to have fun. Usually dragons are mean and scary, and this thing was mean and scary. It was just a big fat dragon. It couldn't move very good. It was more like sliding around and everything instead of like actually walking around like you would see a dragon, or flying around like a dragon would normally do. Then we had Hugh Grant's character, which I think was fleshed out more and more and more. Like, you understood his reasonings and stuff. He's a con man and everything else, and he conned them, and he's doing his thing, and he's there for the riches. Then on top of that, you had the Red Witch, and like I said, I thought she did enough. I thought, like I said, the actress that played her like did really good. I thought that, like I said, I'm just so happy that she wasn't made to be weak or dumb or stupid or funny and like this throwaway character. Now, like you said, I do think that there is like that is probably the weakest part of the story, is like you don't get to see more of her master, and you don't get to see, besides her wanting to do what her master wants her to do. You're right. There's really no story there, to be honest with you. She's done her thing from the beginning to get this like horn that can bring up this red like dust, this red like mist that's gonna like take people and turn them into zombies or fanatics and stuff like that. So like you know where she's going and stuff. So they do a good job about knowing that like that's what she's trying to do and wanting to do and everything else. But like you don't really get anything else, like you said. So I actually agree. Like the plot and story when it comes to the biggest main villain is lacking. But it's almost it was one of those weird things. I thought the rest of the movie did such a good job, and he was having so much fun that like until you mentioned that right now sitting down, I didn't even think about that because I had so much fun with everything else that was going on.
Yeah, and I the way I look at this as I was watching it too, I have to put it on two hats. As someone who's a film critic, an admirer of film, as an art, there were little things that I were poking out like this. Now, as a DM, put my hat on, she was perfect. She's an acolyte, and I get it. She's an acolyte. She's a sycophant for her boss, and is going to do whatever she can to help her boss. That fits the trope of the Red Wizard in Dungeons and Dragons. But a normal person's not going to understand that. I don't think. So that's where the fine line, the balance is. Are we playing this for the Dungeons and Dragons crowd or for the general crowd who hasn't played this? And it's the fine line. And I think in that moment in general, for the person who's not used to Dungeons and Dragons, she might be a little lacking. But everyone else who's used to that will be like, oh, I get it. It makes sense. I just think for a film audience, you needed a little more.
All right, let's go into the next topic, which you kind of jumped in a little bit when we went into the story and plot, because like I said, all the other stuff, all the little candy things that are on the outside of this film is so good and done so well and everything else. And like I said, most of the majority of the story and plot is really good and really fun, right? Like Chris Pine stuff, even Holga's stuff, all these little characters, like things they had to overcome or do or why they're there. I thought that was actually done really well in the story and told really good. Like you said, you pointed out the weakness. So is that the only thing that you would change about this movie then? Because like you did point out that one weakness. Anything you would change or didn't like about the film besides like the villain not being as fleshed out?
I looked at my phone, man. That tells me something about a movie. If I'm watching a movie and I have to go look at my phone to see how long this movie is, something happened. I think this movie was a little too long. I think
that about a lot of movies. Almost every movie I go and see. John Wick 4, for instance. Oh my God, that was
a
almost an hour
long
too
day
long
for you if you did it back to back, my friend.
I did it back to back, man. And John Wick
That
was
is a
like, oh my
long day.
God, dude. It was so like my butt cheeks were getting stuck together,
I was
man.
gonna say, did you have your mail forwarded to the theater at that point?
Bro, it's bad, man. And I think a lot of movies are doing this for whatever reason. They think they have to put a 2.5 hour movie out there. If John Wick 4 was an hour and 45 minutes, bro, I'd have walked out of there probably skipping to the road, because there's a lot of things they didn't have to do in that movie, for instance. But like, go ahead. Like, so you saying at a certain part of the film that you was like looking at your phone, you got kind of bored, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it starts to drag a little during the second act. And I was a little bored. I'll admit it. If this, I wanted this to be, honestly, probably about 20-25 minutes shorter. I really would have condensed it down a little bit, and I don't think I would have been slighted. The fact is that I noticed it was dragging. I can't pinpoint for you exactly where I felt it, but I could tell you somewhere in that second act, I was starting to feel the drag.
Well, I didn't feel that drag, because one of my favorite things about this movie happens to happen in that act that you're talking about, is when they get to the big fat dragon, but working their way to that point is probably around the area where you're talking about. Maybe not that time point exactly, but when they meet the paladin, bro, that's one of my favorite things like in this movies, because like when people pick the paladin to be as their character in Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, people just kind of look at them. Really?
Yeah.
Really? Because like you're in this fight. It's kind of like someone being this like honorable, like all good cleric or whatever in the party. You always have this conflict of like, well, I'm a rogue, like, so I'm going to try to pickpocket and get me some gold. But then like the paladin in your group's like, no, 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 we don't do that. You know what I'm saying? I love the fact that whole section with him in there. I'm dying laughing on the inside the whole time, because I thought they portrayed that so well. Like, I love the fact that he's so righteous. He's so righteous that like he comes in there and he's doing his thing and he can't join them, right? If they had him on their side, like the things you see him do is just amazing. If they had him on their side going into the town to get what they needed to get, they would have got it easily, because he would have just walked in there, did what he needed to do, and get out. But the fact that like he's so righteous that he can't, because technically they're stealing something, even if it's for a good reason, like he can't go with them. And there's a point in this movie that made me like, there's 2 points that he's involved in that are just so hilarious to me. One of them is whenever they're in the cave trying to get the thing that they need to get, that helm of whatever, destruction or whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm.
They're in there trying to get the helmet, and they get up to the thing, and there's these creatures. I don't know much about these creatures, and I do know a decent amount about Dungeons and Dragons, but they had these creatures that looked like they had butt heads, like literally butts for heads. And they were like coming by, and he was like telling them like, be careful. If they sense they attack from intelligence, if they sense a super intelligent creature or whatever, they'll attack. And everybody's so scared, and they're going up against a wall. And then these creatures just don't even notice that they're even there. That to me was funny as hell. The Chris Pine line of like, well, that's kind of insulting. Like, it's just that's perfection. That's comedy done right, like in a film, especially a film like this. But also whenever he's like leaving them and he's walking away, and Chris Pine's like kind of narrating his walk. He's like, look at him. He's so stoic. Like he just walks in a straight line. Will he falter? And he's like still going in a straight line.
Walks
like,
over the rock.
He's coming up to a rock. Will he walk around the rock? Will he stop going in a straight line? And no, he just jumped over it. Like he just literally like hops on the rock and still going straight. And as they're talking about the next thing they're going to do, you can see him in the background, never changing direction, just walking straight. That's it. Like it was so good. So I could see like if that stuff wasn't making you laugh as much, or if that stuff like involving the paladin wasn't like super great for you, where maybe that could drag a little bit for you. But man, I was having so much fun with it. I'm gonna be honest with you. The opposite. I was intrigued by almost every bit of this. I mean, of course, every movie's got a couple of like spots in it that like you get a little bored maybe because they're talking about what they're trying to do. Like you may already understand what their game plan is, so you don't have to hear every single word of it, but they're trying to explain that to the people that might be in the movie that don't notice it or don't need it or whatever. So like, but I didn't feel that way, like I said, but like you obviously did, so others probably did as well.
The only other thing I would probably touch and change, I don't think it was needed. It was just to get them a special item that we can talk about later, but was Holga, the stuff with Holga's ex-husband. There's a cameo in there. The cameo itself is fine, it's nice, but that entire stuff slows it down. It only serves the purpose to give Holga an item that later is necessary. Now that's very much an RPG trope. That is a huge RPG trope. I don't think character-wise we needed that scene. It adds a little bit of comedy to it. Don't get me wrong, and I like the comedy, but I think for the purpose of the overall story, it wasn't needed.
Yeah, I can kind of get that to a certain point, but like you just said, when you sit down and do D&D adventures, that's kind of stuff that you do, right? You go like the DM might make you like a lot of, if you're a good if you're a good DM, you make your characters do backstories. You don't just let them create their character and whatever. You make them put up a little bit of backstory, and then if you're a really good DM, you actually use some of that backstory in the story that you made. Like, so maybe they have this character flaw, and then like this made them do this thing or whatever, and then like you make them revisit that in the game session and everything else. And this is something that like she had looks like she has a weakness for small men, and the small man in her life like kind of dumped her because she was like upset that she got like thrown out by her clan and stuff. Now I actually thought that this was sort of needed, because if she didn't have this part of the story where you learn like what really happened with her, like why she got kicked out of her clan and stuff, I don't think her character would have been very fleshed out either. She'd have just been like, oh, I'm a big brute, I'm coming in here being the barbarian, that's all you need to know. And I think that would have been fine. I actually agree with you. It doesn't add too much, but like when I look back at all these characters and everything else, like she gets fleshed out more because I know like some of her things, like, right? Like, why is her and Chris Pine not together? Well, Chris Pine's normal sized man. That's why we found that out. She likes those little fellas, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it was also another way to like, look, when you look at the party, like we see dwarves in the movie at some point, but when you look at the party makeup, like they didn't have any halflings either, which I know that'd be kind of tough to, you have to do a lot of CGI stuff, and it makes it movie costs a lot more. So I get it why you didn't want to have them in the party, but that throws the halflings in there, like, as a whole, like inside the story, inside the universe. So if they wanted to add a character like that, you know what I'm saying, in the second movie or something, you won't be like, well, where's these little people come from? That's part of Dungeons and Dragons. You got halflings and dwarves, then you got humans and half elves and all this other stuff right there. And to be honest with you, I love the fact too, they didn't feel the need to have to describe every kind of different person, whether it be like giants or half elves or halflings or orcs or any of this stuff right here, that like they just put them on the screen. No need to like describe every little thing that you see or whatever when it comes to that. But I'll be honest with you, I don't have that much stuff that I would change or didn't like. There's minor nitpicks here and there. Like I'd probably have to see it, another, and I will. I'm going to end up watching this movie probably a few more times before it's said and done with. And then maybe there'll be something that's pointed out, but I just had so much fun. I was like either laughing or smiling or, like, oh shit, like they're doing this, or, oh crap, there's some like, and it's really good action scenes and stuff with them going up against different creatures and the Red Witch and everything else. Like, and then like you said, even too, like if you're a big Dungeons and Dragons fan, even when they're naming some of the locations, you know what I'm saying? Like your ears perk up. It's like, oh, they say that, they say this, and they're not going to all those locations, which is really cool. And like, one of the things they could have did was made it to where they could get find where the Helm of Destruction was easier. But man, dude, that's
That
one of the
scene
things you
in the
can say is a nit,
graveyard
but
should
that
not be
graveyard
touched.
scene is so freaking good,
That
dude.
graveyard scene was great. I love
Oh
that
yeah, it's
graveyard
so
scene.
good. Like,
Yeah.
please don't take that out of the movie. And I'm glad they
No.
didn't. That probably made it run a little long. And you really don't have to have it. They could have been
I
like, oh wait, I
genuinely,
know where the helm is. Like the
yeah.
Paladin, he had it from like, you know, and they could have went just straight to him and had him show him where it was basically, and not and take this out. But oh my god, it was so much fun watching these dead guys get raised up, and then they have like these stupid stories. And it was just really funny how they told, well, where the helmet went, who got the helmet finally, and everything else. Like, one guy gets out of the bathtub, slips and hits his head like whenever the skirmish starts to happen at the very beginning, and dies from it. So he's like, I didn't see anything, I'm dead. Oh, aren't you so and so? He's like, no, that's my brother. So they have to go dig up his brother and like ask his brother questions.
But I love it. Wait, you still got questions. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? What kind of music do you like? Like, I love the jokes. I laughed. I genuinely laughed out loud in the theater during that scene and enjoyed it.
Yeah, and then like the one guy, they thought they'd asked him 5 questions, but it was only 4, and he's like, still, oh come on, somebody asked me a question. He's even like in part of a mid-credit scene where he's like still sitting there and like nobody. He's like, please, can somebody ask me the question? Like straight up, because he had to ask until they got asked 5 questions. They couldn't go back to their rest and everything else.
I knew when I saw that, I knew what they were going to do right away. I knew that was coming back, and I was okay with it.
All right, man. So, like, overall, what was your favorite moment, Chris?
Wow, favorite moment. Okay. I gotta say, the moment that kind of got me with it, went, this is pretty cool, was when our tiefling druid, when we first see her shape-shifting and fighting as an owlbear, that whole sequence of introducing her was so cool. Close running up was, there's an escape sequence that she has from the castle where she goes in as a fly and she gets caught. They find out who she is, and she has to escape the castle, and she goes through this shape-shifting kind of sequence that is a little off-brand for the game. In the rules, you can't do that, but for the sake of a movie, we'll say she can. That was cool. All the different animals and ways to get in and out, and I was
right. Well, let's be honest, Chris. They do that in the game because like the druid would just be so damn broken,
wouldn't it?
Like the DM, you as a DM, because like you were saying earlier, as a dungeon master, you would not be able to stop a druid if they could just turn into whatever they wanted to whenever they wanted to.
Yep.
That's why in the game they have those restrictions. But like, if you were to think about it, it makes more sense for a druid to, if they have that ability, just to be able to do it.
Yeah. But yeah, she's not only my favorite character in this, the scenes with her fighting and escaping the castle were well done. And then we already mentioned it, the graveyard scene. That graveyard scene's funny.
All right, man. Like, I'm gonna go off on a little bit of a thing here because I know it will be said by some of the haters out there, which there's not very much. Like I said, if you see the ratings and stuff like that and the money it's making, there's not a lot of haters out there, but there are some out there. Some of them's going to be like, oh, this movie hates men. I already seen that even before the movie came out. I saw some dude do a video like, oh, they openly admitted it. But it's like your 2 main characters would be your wizard and Chris Pine. And then you have your 2 main women characters, which are the barbarian and the druid. Barbarian and the druid are pretty strong characters, man. They can get some stuff done. Obviously, a druid's always strong because they can turn into these different animals for the situation and stuff like that. And a barbarian is always strong, man or woman, it don't matter. But Chris Pine's got his flaws. The sorcerer, the wizard that we get up with, he's got his flaws as well. But before you start throwing out like, oh, this movie don't like men, or oh, this movie made men look weak, I'm actually going to defer. I'm actually going to say no, it doesn't. Because these dudes did have issues. Like, one of them had confidence problems. One of them had the issues of trying to do good for his family, but he made some of the bad decisions, got himself in some like situations that caused him to even get another situation that causes him to lose his daughter. His wife got killed because he stole some gold from the red wizards. You know what I'm saying? Like and that ended up starting all this thing. So it was his fault and he had to overcome that. But those 2 gentlemen in the movie overcome both of those things. You're a lot stronger of a person if you have things to overcome, and you can overcome them to be triumphant in the end. Okay. So I just wanted to mention that. Like, to me, that's just dumb. Now, if they would have made these characters stupid and dumb, and the one guy still not have confidence by the end of the film, and Chris Pine, you know, still be kind of weak and stuff, and not be able to get at least his daughter back and everything else and all that stuff, and he wasn't able to overcome those things, then I would agree, right? I'd say, okay, they didn't. But because these two characters had to overcome those things that hurt them, and they were able to actually like do the thing and then come out victorious at the end, like the wizard becomes one of the strongest wizards out there, like almost as strong as the red wizard as soon as he gets his confidence and realizes what was holding him back. Chris Pine's character as the bard, like, makes all these different plans, and to be honest with you, he's making these different ones. It looks like they're failing, but then they all seem to kind of work at different times. Then he's able to do the thing, and he gets his daughter back and earns her respect and everything else, and becomes like a great father and everything. So, like, to me, that makes them like super strong, and almost, you know, to the point of like stronger than the other two characters, because they had more to overcome and they overcame them and became so powerful. So I just wanted to put that on the table. But for my favorite moment of this film is actually the end, because I'm laughing, having a great time seeing all the action scenes and these different creatures and CGI, like monsters, all this stuff. It's a really fun time. Like I said before, I had more fun at this movie than John Wick 4. John Wick 4 was a lot of, I've seen this before. They had one really cool scene that's overhead, but you know, that's on our John Wick review. But there's just this thing that I'm having this fun time doing all this stuff, that at a certain point I was like, this movie doesn't have to have like this big emotional like wrap up kind of ending or anything like that. This movie doesn't have to have that. I'm already having a good time. I'm going to walk out glad that I came and saw this movie. I'm going to be walking out of this movie theater glad that I saw this movie today, because I've already had such a fun time. Like, it doesn't have to have the greatest ending of all time. It doesn't have to have the best third act of all time. It was already good up to a certain point. But then you had all this like stuff, and then it was like, damn, dog, like this movie brought some heart at the end of it. You know, when you got Holga, she's gotten stabbed like by the Red Witch's like knife, and then once that happens, there's nothing you can do about it. She's gonna die. You see her like slowly dying. She's just wanting to talk. They start singing a song that you realized earlier in the film that they knew and would sing each other as a family, because Holga was actually, she kind of stepped in, even though they never got married or anything, but she kind of stepped in to be like a stepmom to Chris Pine's daughter in this film. And like you can see like that Chris Pine's daughter never really knew, because her real mom died when she was just a baby. The only mom she's ever known is this Holga character. And Chris Pine, the whole movie's fighting to get this little tablet thing, like you were talking about, to be able to save his wife. And it's a one-time charm thing that can bring someone back from the dead, basically bring them back to life. And he's finally got it. He's got it in his hands. All he's got to do is get through this, and then he'll be able to bring his wife back. And that moment when he's like looking down at Holga as she's dying, and she dies, and he looks and he's looking at his daughter and stuff, and then he like starts remembering all these things that like Holga was doing for his daughter and stuff, like when he wasn't being the greatest dad in the world, and like being there for his daughter and everything else. And like as Holga dies, his daughter's like, hey, like, oh God, you can't leave me and stuff like this, right? And he looks down at his daughter and says, this whole time, he's like, I'm gonna be honest with you, this whole time, he's like, you were right in a way. I did everything I could to bring back your mom, when all I really was doing was trying to bring back my wife. Because his daughter, man, even though it's her natural birth mom and stuff, and it'd probably be really cool, and she'd probably be really excited to meet her real mom, you know, and everything else as she's grown up now. Like, that's Chris Pine realized, like, him being selfish, right? Like in that moment, like, I'm really just trying to bring back my wife. You don't even know your mom, you know, to be honest. She wouldn't be able to recognize her mom if she saw her, because she was just a baby. And for him to choose to use that for Holga, for his daughter at that moment, is like really strong and powerful. And it's got like this heartfelt thing. It didn't feel like this tropey kind of ending and everything else. Like the story part of it made sense. Like his struggle to get this thing made sense. So to have all this fun and like this battle scene where they overcome and you think everything's going to be happy and hunky-dory, and then you see like the person stabbed, like you're like, are they going to do this where like maybe the musician can do something to help her? No, man, they take that away. She literally dies. He has to make this ultimate sacrifice with this tablet that he'd been fighting for the whole time. Yeah. And I really love the fact that it threw that in there. It threw that heart, that emotion into the film, into a movie that probably didn't even need it. And I really enjoy the writers and stuff for putting this in there, the director for choosing to put this in there and everything else. And the actors and actresses for the way they portrayed it, because like it wasn't silly, it wasn't stupid. It was an actual serious moment. You know, there's a joke or two maybe beforehand that doesn't involve this, but it's right after they defeat the Red Witch. You know what I'm saying? And then they turn around and see her on the ground, then it becomes serious. One of my problems that I've been having with the MCU and all of its little movies and iterations so far, like Ant-Man and the Wasp, even a little bit with Wakanda Forever and everything else, straight up 100%, every time there's a serious moment, 5 jokes got to be told during the serious moment. And in this movie, it's a movie that literally is joke, something funny, circumstantial humor, that kind of stuff. Then all of a sudden you get to this, and it was really heartfelt, really well written, and really well done, and everything else. And I got to give them so much props not following. They could easily try to follow that MCU formula because of how great the MCU has been. You know what I'm saying? Like how much money MCU movies has been making. They could have easily just tried to copy that and follow that route, and they didn't. They chose not to. Thank you. Thank you, writers. Thank you, directors, because I'm getting sick and tired of it. And when this happened, that's why it's my favorite moment, is because like it really got me. It really came unexpected because I'm so used to sitting in those movie theaters and these things becoming kind of jokes, like nobody's ever going to die because of this, or this, and everything else. Like I've been getting in these Marvel movies, and for this movie to really take a scene like that seriously, really portray it seriously, is super good and super great. So refreshing. Maybe that's even one of the reasons why I love this movie even more than other people might love it, is because, man, I'm just getting sick and tired of that. But that literally is my favorite moment. And it's a heartfelt moment. It's not a joke. It's not one of the funny scenes. And you'll find a bunch of them. We talked about a couple of them here when you watch the films yourselves. But like straight up 100%, this movie is a movie to go see. But well, let's just jump into it, Chris. Closing thoughts, man.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. Again, little slow in the middle for me, but when I put on my DM hat, I realized, you know, I'm enjoying this. I'm loving what I'm seeing. This is a game that I love and I massively play all the time. So to see all of that was so worth it. And I think, as you said, I'm the only person who really was complaining about the length a little bit. So in general, I think everybody that's going to go see this is going to enjoy this, because I think you know what you're walking into getting. You're just going to have a good old-fashioned fantasy film, and it is not abashed to admit it. And I think that's its true strength in the end, is that it knows exactly what it is, and it has no qualms playing into itself. And I like that. I do like that.
Yeah. Closing thoughts. I was about to get into it. That's why I switched it over to this final thing, is go watch this movie. It's fun. It's fun. It's got heart. It's got action. It's got comedy. It's got love. Now, maybe not, it's not like a couple love, you know what I'm saying? It's not like a husband and wife kind of love story or any of that stuff, but it's got the love between a father and a daughter. It's got those kind of things. Even a love of a newfound relationship between the druid and the sorcerer or whatever, right? Like this new relationship that's starting to blossom and everything else. So you even get kind of that. So you get all these aspects of storytelling wrapped up into this movie. And a lot of times when that kind of stuff happens, you can say, oh, the comedy parts of this movie was super great, but the rest of it sucked. The daughter-father thing was great, but the rest of this movie sucked. Or, you get those kind of things when you have a movie that tries to do all these things like this movie did. But guess what? Even in the things that Chris was saying, right? Like earlier, that may be some things that he would change or whatever in the movie, because not every movie's perfect anyway. But like none of that stuff that he say was like, oh, the comedy of this movie sucked, or the action of this movie sucked, or the stories and between the father and daughter and that kind of stuff sucked. Nah, man, because it didn't. All of it was good. which is really hard to do, and they pulled it off. You know what I'm saying? That's why I don't want, if they make a second one, and I hope they do, and I think they will, because overall this movie is going to be profitable for the companies and stuff like that, is, man, come on, please don't be dumb. Keep this team together. Keep this team together at least for one more movie. At least one more. Sign these people up. Sign the writers. Pay them whatever they want. And even if you have to cut some like big budget items from it to be able to keep these actors, actresses, and the director and writers and stuff together for one more film, just so that you can pay them more money, because that's what happens most of the time. The second movie is going to come out. It's like, well, we did so good on the first one. Now you're going to have to pay us a raise, a pretty big money. Pay them the money. Do it. Do it. I think Hasbro had something to do with this film and everything else. I think Universal is the one that like kind of helped them produce it and put it out and everything else. But like, dude, do the thing, man. Let them do it. And because this was a great heartwarming film, man, and like with a bunch of funny and action moments, and a lot of times these kind of style of movies or whatever can go the wrong direction, the wrong way with all that stuff going on. But yeah, man, I can just say go see it. This movie, for me, 8.5. If I see it again and I like it a little better, because sometimes I'll change my score just a little bit on the second viewing, because maybe I judged something too harshly, or maybe I didn't catch something that makes it even a better movie like afterwards. But right now I'm sitting at around the 8.5, and this movie to me could be a 9. And I know it's super early in the year, but this movie could be definitely, I can go ahead and guarantee you this is going to be one of my pleasant surprises of the year, like dark horse movies of the year that I wasn't expecting a lot out of, and it turned out to be. But this movie might be my favorite movie that I see all year, even looking at some of the slates. And now the horror genre that's coming up this month is going to give it a run for its money, because I'm excited about the Evil Dead movie. There's a couple other horror films that's coming out this year that might be up there. But as far as like going shoving popcorn into your face style movie, this might be my favorite one all year. And I know that's super early. I haven't seen them all, but like I'm not expecting a lot from what Marvel has coming out the rest of the year. I mean, not getting any Star Wars, you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to be looking into a lot of like DC stuff that's maybe coming out this year because it's not exciting me either and stuff like that. So, but yeah. Any last words before we get out of here, Chris?
Nah, go see it, and then go play some D&D, guys.
Yeah, dude, go play the game for real. Go play the game. And these are all those great characters and people that we talked about during this thing. And just appreciate you guys for everybody that watched. Please leave a like, thumbs up. Give us your comments, man. What do you think about like this movie as a whole? Did you guys enjoy it? Like if you went and watched it and everything else? And do you play Dungeons and Dragons? Put all those kind of comments down there below. It kind of helps us out, but it's also fun to interact with people and stuff afterwards. But until next time, stay sexy.